The Baltic Sea is calm only when it wants to be. On the night of September 27, 1994, it did not. A cold wind pushed across the Gulf between Tallinn and Stockholm, carrying the scent of rain and diesel. The ferry MS Estonia, a 15,000-ton passenger ship, stood at the terminal under flickering floodlights. Inside, families checked into their cabins, truck drivers rolled their cargo onto the car deck, and tourists found their way to the bar. The atmosphere was ordinary: laughter, music, coffee in paper cups. By 7 o'clock p.m., the ship's engines were humming. Captain Arvo Andresen and First Officer Ive Armasika stood on the bridge, reviewing weather updates. Winds up to 40 knots, waves reaching 6 meters. Rough, but not unusual for the Baltic in autumn. At 7:15 p.m., Estonia left the harbor, her blue hull cutting through the dark water. There were 989 people on board, passengers from 17 countries, 803 of them bound for Sweden. Among them, a school group, a Swedish pop band, military couriers, young Estonian couples seeking work abroad. Few of them noticed that the ferry had a slight roll even before leaving port. A normal sway, the crew said. At 9 p.m., the wind increased. Spray lashed the windows on deck 7. Passengers returned to their cabins as the ship began to pitch more sharply. The car deck, sealed behind the massive bow visor, groaned with every wave. Down there, vehicles shifted in their chains, and metal slammed against metal. By 11 p.m., seas reached 8 meters. Waves struck the bow with a sound like hammer blows. Crew members on the lower decks reported unusual noises forward. The assistant boatswain walked to the car deck and thought he saw water mist pushing through a gap near the visor hinges. He radioed the bridge. "Maybe we should check the bow door," he said. But the storm was worsening, and the ship's stabilizers were already struggling to compensate. The captain ordered the speed reduced slightly and continued west. Estonia was built to handle far worse. At least, that's what everyone believed. In the cabins, people tried to sleep through the rolling. Some prayed. Others laughed at the motion, unaware they were living their last hour. The ship was moving at 14 knots into a headwind strong enough to shake the windows. At midnight, the rain turned to cold spray. Lightning flashed somewhere behind the clouds. The Baltic was a black mirror, rippling with white crests. Inside the bridge, the radar screen flickered as the crew adjusted their course, 287 degrees towards Stockholm. No one knew that within 90 minutes, the Estonia would be gone, swallowed whole by the same sea that now clawed at her hull. The last normal log entry read simply, "Course steady." Weather heavy seas, all systems operational. The next note would never be written. The MS Estonia had been built 14 years earlier in Germany under a different name, Viking Sally. She was part of a new generation of ferries, designed for the booming car and passenger routes across the Nordic seas. Quick to load, quick to sail, profitable. Her defining feature was a bow visor, a hydraulic door that opened upward to let vehicles roll on and off through a ramp. Behind it was a second inner door, the ramp itself meant to form a watertight seal. On paper, it was efficient. In reality, it was a vulnerability. Over the years, the ship changed owners and routes: Silja Star, Wasa King, and finally, in 1993, MS Estonia. Under S-Line's blue and white flag, she became a symbol of independence for the newly free Baltic states. She was refurbished, repainted, and praised as a bridge between East and West, but there were cracks behind the paint. Maintenance logs showed corrosion around the visor hinges, and several ferries of the same design had already reported damage in heavy seas. The bow door system relied on locking pins and hydraulic arms to withstand wave impacts, components that, after years of strain, were showing wear. Engineers recommended reinforcements. They never came. Her design met the legal safety codes of the 1980s, not the lessons learned later. The car deck, wide and open, ran nearly the full length of the ship. Once water entered it, the effect was catastrophic. Even a few centimeters of seawater could destabilize the vessel within minutes. The crew knew this. It was standard maritime training. But no one believed it would happen here. Estonia carried lifeboats for more than 1,000 people, but their davits were manually operated and required the ship to be upright. In a major list, they would be impossible to launch. Her emergency exits were narrow stairwells leading upward from the car deck, quickly impassable if the ship rolled. On paper, the Estonia could survive with 2 compartments flooded. In reality, she would capsize with one. Still, the ship was cleared to sail that night. Inspections were routine. Paperwork was complete. The same system that had declared her seaworthy for 14 years would, hours later, declare her lost with all hands due to unforeseen structural failure. When she left Tallinn, she was carrying 40 trucks, 36 cars, and hundreds of tons of cargo, from food and electronics to military containers, later claimed to hold classified equipment. Whether that cargo played any role in the sinking remains one of the Baltic's enduring mysteries. The Estonia was never built to die in 30 minutes, but on that September night, she met the one condition her engineers never truly tested: a perfect combination of speed, storm, and mechanical weakness. Above deck, the passengers saw only rain streaking across the lights. Below, deep in the bow, a metal hinge began to give way. The countdown had begun. By midnight, the Baltic had turned savage, winds howled at 45 knots, and the ferry pitched so violently that glasses slid from tables and shattered on the floor. Passengers clung to railings as corridors tilted from side to side. On the bridge, Captain Anderson watched waves explode against the bow visor, tons of water hammering steel. The hull shuddered after every impact. Crewmen reported strange metallic bangs from the car deck. The captain ordered speed reduced. It didn't help. At 0:30, the ship rolled sharply to port, then righted itself. In the lounge, people laughed nervously, mistaking it for turbulence. A waitress served coffee to a handful of insomniacs. Down below, seawater sprayed through the visor's rubber seals, unnoticed by most. By 1 a.m., the wind reached 50 knots. The Estonia groaned as if alive, every plate and beam trembling. The bosun tried again to check the visor area, but turned back. The noise and spray were overwhelming. Something up front was breaking loose. At 1:15 a.m., the first metallic crack echoed through the ship. Then another, louder, sharper. On the bridge, instruments flickered. A shock ran through the hull like a punch. The officers froze. The bow visor, a 55-ton steel gate, had torn free. It ripped backward, smashing into the ramp behind it and pulling it open. A wall of seawater thundered onto the car deck, flooding it within seconds. The ship lurched violently to starboard 15, then 30, then 45. Passengers were thrown from their bunks, lights flickered, then failed. Alarms screamed through the corridors, water roared up the stairwells, cold and black. Something's wrong with the ship. Voices shouted in the dark, doors jammed as the tilt increased. People crawled upward, slipping on wet metal. Some never made it past deck 4. On the bridge, the captain called out a single mayday. Mayday, Estonia. We have heavy list. Engines stopped, the transmission cut. Below, the car deck had become a trapped ocean. Water sloshed from side to side, amplifying the tilt. Within 5 minutes, the ferry was on her side. Lifeboats dangled uselessly, out of reach. Outside, the storm howled louder than any human voice. Inside, the screams began to fade beneath the sound of rushing water. The MS Estonia was dying. 1:22 a.m., the radio operator pressed the transmitter. Mayday, Mayday, this is Estonia. The call was faint, broken by static. Nearby ferries, Silja Europa, Mariella, caught fragments, heavy list. Lost engine power. Then silence. The last human words from the ship vanished into interference. On the bridge, The crew tried to restart the engines, but the list was now past 60 degrees. Consoles slid, chairs toppled. The captain shouted for passengers to move aft, but no one could move anywhere. Inside the corridors, water roared up the stairwells. Metal groaned as pressure built. People clawed toward any upward space. Some broke windows, others kicked through doors. The lights went out completely. A few managed to reach the outer decks. They faced chaos, sideways floors, wind, freezing rain, and black water below. The lifeboats hung uselessly, swung out over the sea. One broke free and smashed into the hull. A voice crackled through the radio on Silja Europa. "Estonia, do you copy?" Nothing. By 1:30, radar screens showed the ship's speed dropping to 0. A blip flickered, then disappeared. The Estonia was no longer moving. The sinking was fast, brutal, final. From the first flood to complete loss, less than 30 minutes. Passengers clung to walls that had become ceilings. The ship rolled almost completely onto her side. Water burst through ventilation shafts. Every door became a trap. Some jumped. Most didn't. The air outside was near freezing. The sea colder still, 10 degrees Celsius. Life jackets offered no warmth, only time. 1:50 a.m., the Estonia disappeared beneath the waves, sternlast. The storm swallowed the lights, leaving only white foam and the cries of those who had escaped. Within minutes, most voices were gone. When rescuers arrived, they found only debris, life rings, seat cushions, overturned rafts. Out of 989 souls, 852 were lost. Only 137 survived, most pulled from the icy blackness by nearby ships at dawn. One survivor later said, "I saw the ship go down. It looked like it was folding into itself. Then it was gone. By sunrise, the Baltic was calm again, flat, cold, silent. As if nothing had happened. 2 a.m. the storm still roared. The Mariella was the first to reach the area. Her crew scanned the waves with searchlights, nothing but foam and wreckage. Then, a flash of orange, a life raft, upside down, men clinging to it, silent from cold. Helicopters from Finland and Sweden arrived hours later. Wind gusts made hovering nearly impossible. Rescuers lowered winches into chaos, survivors too frozen to grab the ropes, some slipping away as hands lost strength. By dawn, only 137 people had been pulled from the sea. Most were hypothermic, unable to speak. The rest, minus 852 souls, were gone. The Baltic was calm again, glittering under the grey sunrise. "It looked like peace," one rescuer said, "but it was full of ghosts." The investigation began before the bodies were counted. 3 nations, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, formed a joint commission. In 1997, the final report concluded, the bow visor locks failed in heavy seas, allowing water onto the car deck. Structural failure led to rapid capsizing. Mechanically, it made sense. Emotionally, few believed it. Survivors spoke of explosions. Divers reported debris inconsistent with the visor theory. Whispers spread. Military cargo hidden among the trucks. Secret shipments from post-Soviet bases to Sweden. When journalists tried to return to the wreck, the governments declared it a protected grave. Diving prohibited, punishable by prison. Cameras were banned. Families were told the site was sacred. Better to let it rest, but to many, it felt like a lid slammed shut. Years later, new footage surfaced, a hole torn in the hull, never mentioned in the official report. Why had no one seen it before? Why had the seabed been covered with sand after the first divees? The Baltic, once again, held its silence, and the Estonia remained a ship of 2 stories, one written in reports, and one whispered by those who survived. In the years that followed, the wreck of MS Estonia became a line that governments refused to cross. By 2000, Estonia, Sweden, and Finland signed the Grave Peace Agreement, a treaty forbidding dives, filming, or salvage. The site was declared sacred, off limits forever. Families were told no one would disturb their loved ones. But many wanted the opposite, to bring them home. They were not buried, one mother said. They were left in a machine. Attempts to recover the dead were blocked. When engineers proposed sealing the wreck with concrete, protests erupted. "Don't cover the truth," the banners read. The sea stayed closed, guarded by law and silence. Whispers of cover-ups never stopped. Survivors claimed to have seen trucks with military escorts loading at the terminal hours before departure. Swedish journalists revealed customs documents showing classified cargo. Officials denied everything. In 2020, a Swedish documentary team sent an ROV to the site, illegally. The cameras revealed a 4-meter hole torn in the hull. It wasn't mentioned in the 1997 report. The discovery reignited questions buried for decades. If the visor caused the sinking, how did that hole appear? And why had the government tried to bury the wreck under sand just months after the disaster? No one had answers, only the same cold phrase, "Respect the grave." Today, MS Estonia still lies 80 meters below the surface, on her starboard side. Lights long gone, cabins filled with silt. Divers describe the site as eerie and still. Plates lie on tables. A teddy bear floats near the ceiling. The Baltic has preserved everything except the truth. Every September, survivors and families gather at memorials in Tallinn and Stockholm. They read 850 names aloud, bells toll. Some stare out toward the grey horizon, where the wind never stops. For many, it's not just grief, it's anger. A sense that their dead were buried under paperwork and politics. "We were told it was an accident," one survivor says. But no one wants to look too closely at why. The Estonia was supposed to unite the Baltic. Instead, she divided it, between those who believe in the storm and those who believe in secrets. 30 years later, the questions remain the same. Was it a design flaw, or something hidden in the cargo hold? Did the visor fail, or was it a distraction from what really sank her? The governments have moved on, the sea never will. Down there, in the cold dark, the ship still lists, her decks frozen in the moment of panic. The clocks on board stopped at 1:50 a.m. The waves rolled over, the storm passed, and the Baltic kept its secret. "The sea has memory," a diver once said, "and it keeps the truth long after the voices are gone."